Welcome to our ElderQuest Potpourri. I hope you understand that as board members, we all have different responsibilities. And I'm the past president on the board this year, and my responsibility is to set up the potpourris. And so that's why I'm introducing John today. You'll recognize him because he also teaches the class for us, the World and I class. John began stamp collecting when he was 12, and after retiring from the U.S. Marine Corps in 1990, he acquired a huge accumulation of stamps and stamp material. Since then, he's been collecting and selling postage stamps from all over the world. He specializes in the old classic United States stamps. He is known as the quirky stamp guy because he likes to find stamps with mistakes or errors. He really likes to go on stamp treasure hunts, and finding a rare or unique stamp is a thrill. There are many types of collecting styles which make it enjoyable for everyone. So I hope you'll enjoy his presentation today. And he brought some friends with him, but I'll let him introduce them.
I'd like to begin by talking about the stamps and how communication was back in the early 1700s, back in the colony area. Back then, that was how the 13 colonies were set up. And as you can see here, the coastal area along the coast is where most of the little towns and big towns were. And so as time went on, the communication was basically in the 1700s up to about 1800 was by ship. The ship captains with the mail and stuff, and they would push them up and down the coast. Anyway, after that time around, the train came along. And the train was up about 1830 right here. You can see this is about 1860. This is how the trains were across the United States. And it was pretty much up to the Civil War time. Then the trains moved across the country to the West Coast on the Transcontinental Railroad. And out here at Promontory Point, we have a special point about that. By 1900, the trains were all across the United States, everywhere just about. And here is a good map of that showing you where they're at, everywhere. But because of that, the post offices and the train depots eventually, and general stores, became the post office. And they had post offices everywhere. Even little towns that only had a handful of people had a post office. So here's a inside of one of the train depots where they got the mail and sorting it. Another picture here was a mail drop right there off of a side of a train. And here is a picture of a train depot again, where inside they're sorting mail and getting it ready to go on to the next location. And this is what happens back in the early days of the trains. Here is an envelope that was mailed before the stamps came out. So these are called stampless letters. And the people would take a piece of paper and write a message on it and then fold it in 3 or 4 different places, put a little wax on it, stamp it on it, seal it, because they didn't know how to seal it back then like we do now. And they would mail it. And there's the date on that one, 1844. You notice there that this is another one, and this, the marking is on one side and the other. Now we come to the time of the birth of the stamp collecting. The very first postage stamp. It was Queen Victoria, May 1st, 1840. Approximately 68 million of them were printed. Today, you can get a used one in fair condition for about $100. That's about the best you can do in most cases. Queen Victoria looked like this about that time. She was about 20 years old. And here's a picture of her, a picture taken of her later about that time. The stamp that had her on it there is this one, the penny black. Here's a picture of her again on 6 there. That there is probably worth close to $1,000 or more. That there set right there, that's 6. The next one here is another one they call the penny red. Again, she's on the stamp. Ironically, because the British Empire started that, they also begot almost every British Empire country at that time, or province or whatever. Queen Victoria was the image they put on the stamps at that time, back in the 1840s and 50s, up until the time that she died. Here's one that's interesting. It's from Tasmania with her picture on it. Tasmania is an island off the south coast of Australia. And here's another one from Canada. The printing press weren't very big there, or weren't very complicated back then. They just put the paper on and run across, and off the stamps came. In March 3rd, 1845, the United States got involved. They sent an effective July 1, between the time of the Act of 1845 until the uniform, they set up to find the uniform rates for postage stamps for the United States. Postage stamps were not issued at that time. They were finding out the rates. So on March 3rd, 1847, the postmaster authorized stamps to be issued. Well, some of the postmasters got excited and they issued their own stamps ahead of the federal postage stamps. And these here were issued from Alexandria, Virginia, Annapolis, Maryland, Baltimore, and right on down. These are called the provisional stamps, postmaster provisionals. And if you notice, the cheapest one on there is $500. The most expensive on those postmaster provisionals is $600,000. Yes, that's true. This is the cheapest one, the New York Postal provisional one. This is the one from St. Louis. And this next one here is the New Haven, Connecticut one, which is about $100,000 to $300,000. Then on July 1st, 1847, the United States issued its first stamps. And here they are. Ben Franklin and Washington, George Washington, a 5-cent stamp and a 10 stamp. The 5-cent, they printed 3 million of them, and the other one printed out about 863,000 of those. And those run around $200 to $300 a piece if you can find a good one today. Then the 1851, we printed out these kind of stamps. These are beautiful stamps, mostly of George Washington, and one of Ben Franklin and one of Thomas Jefferson. They printed those up until 1857. Here's an example of one of the stamps on an envelope there. If you notice, the stamp is on the left-hand side of the envelope, and so is the cancellation mark. And there's also, notice there's something else missing there. They didn't have return addresses. This was common up until after the Civil War. So you wrote a letter to somebody in the Civil War. If they didn't get it, you never knew because it never came back. Here's another example. It's kind of really got a lot of markings all over, but that's another example of that era. And then the war came along, and this is the stamps that they printed during the Civil War. All except the Abraham Lincoln stamp. That was actually printed after the war as a commemorative stamp to honor him because of his assassination. But all the others were during the Civil War. There's a problem there. Here they are. You can take a look at them. And here's one. It's on an envelope, and again, it's the stamps in the wrong location. I'll tell you how that got taken care of. So the Civil War had a couple problems here in the United States. One of those, after they separated from the Union, the South had to get its own stamps. So the South printed their own stamps, and here they are. But again, just like when we started in the United States, some of the postmasters and some of the towns got excited because they didn't have no stamps. They couldn't use the northern stamps anymore, so they created their own. Here's some. So these provisionals in the South are rare and expensive, just like the others. Here's some more right here. A little hard to see, but that's some more from the South. Then after the war took place, they continued using these stamps, and the Lincoln stamp came out. And that's when they brought that out. But there was a problem. The stamps were still being used, North and South, and they didn't want people to start I guess there was a problem with the stamps. People were, I guess, using the old stamps and rubbing the ink off, and so they decided to put grills on the stamps. And so they created the stamps with grills on them, A, B, C, right through Z right there. And those are the stamps. I want to make mention, that's why I got those in red. A, B, C, D, and J and Z are the rare ones. Those are the ones that kind of like mistakes. They didn't kind of keep track of how that went. And I'll explain, you'll see here in a minute why. So this one here, that's a grill on the back of the stamp. Look, that's what it looks like. It's a bunch of little dots and usually a rectangular or a square pattern. And that was the grill. They figured if they put the little holes in the stamp, when they put the ink on it, the ink wouldn't come out. There's another grill. And then at Lincoln here, I already explained about him. Here's a stamp with a grill on it. And then there was grill errors. Here's some of the errors. Double grill, one split, double grill, quadruple split, end roller, split grill, triple grill, quadruple grill, and a grill. If they printed the stamp and it's supposed to have a grill on it and it didn't have a grill on it, then it's rare. So they had a few of those. Anyway, I want to mention this because this is the Ben Franklin stamp with the Z grill, the most valuable stamp in the United States. There it is. Only two out there. And it's valued at $3 million. But that was about 10 years ago. That's what it sold for. So today it may be worth much more. That's the back of the stamp. This is another one. This is another one. I think this is the one worth about $1 million with the Z grill on it. There you go, see? Only 4 known to be existing. Then the next set of stamps came out in 1869, and this is what they look like. And they're very beautiful stamps, are very highly collectible for this, what they call the classic US stamps. They picture Franklin, Washington, Lincoln, and a variety of other things, even Columbus. And then the Colombian stamps came out about 1893, and that's what they look like. Most of the stamps on the Colombian issues are very collectible. The 5 stamps at the bottom there, the 50 cents to $1, $2, $3, $4, and $5 one, very minimal amount of those were printed because of the value, and so they're a little higher priced and expensive to get a hold of in good condition, anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 plus dollars. And there's a good picture of them there. This is the first airplane stamp that I know of in the world. It was printed in 1877 on June 18th. 300 of them were printed. It's called the Buffalo Balloon stamp, and it was flown by balloon from Nashville, Tennessee to Gallatin, Tennessee. Values in the thousands of dollars for this one. This is our first airmail stamps. They were printed in 1918. They came out in 1918, and right after the World War II was pretty much over. And these stamps were used to send mail by air, and the people started flying planes from various locations around the country taking mail. And this is the first ones. The reason I brought these up is because of this one here. This is one of the most of the valuable stamps in the United States. A catalog says $450,000, but here I'll show you, it says 450,000. There was 100 of them printed. Only one of these ever come up for auction nowadays, about once every 4 or 5 years, if it does, and the prices keep going up.
10 million on the last one.
The last auction, I think they said it was about $1 million, a little over $1 million for one stamp. It's getting really tight on this one. This was a reprint of the stamp here about 10 years ago, $2 stamps to commemorate the 1918 printing. And so this is quite a nice collectible item right now. And to make it more fun, the post office printed some upright ones in these, and they're going for around, if you can find a sheet of them, around $75,000 to $100,000 per sheet. For the ones that are upright, not the upside down ones. You remember the movie Charade? And also, that's why I mentioned that, because in the movie charade, they're looking for these 3 stamps that are worth about $250,000. And she finally goes to the guy that had them, and she's just stunned, just totally stunned. That was the whole movie, is all about these 3 stamps. The other movie, and the reason I brought this one in, is Brewster's Millions. I just showed you that stamp here a minute ago. Right there. See that? In Brewster's Millions, he bought that stamp. I think it was over $1 million. He bought the stamp in the movie, put it on a postcard, and sent it to the lawyers. So I just want to let you know that's the stamp he did this with. This is a list, and you've got it in your handouts. This is 20 or 21 of the most valuable U.S. stamps. Every one of these here are above $175,000. Every one of these were printed before I think almost every one of them was printed before 1918, because the inverted jenny's on this too, but majority of them are before 1900. And if you look at the very top there, the red ones, these are all the ones that got grills on them. And so about half of those are from the 1860s and 70s with the grills. So if you're going to stamp hunting and you want to go treasure hunting, that's where the rare ones are. I wanted to bring this one up because this is a kind of interesting little story. The Graf Zeppelin was a very famous ship back in the 1930s. It was an airship that had went around the world, went to the North Pole, delivered mail to like Brazil and various other places. But in 1933 and 34, they had the Century of Progress World's Fair up in Chicago. And on October the 26th, 1933, the Graf Zeppelin showed up in Chicago. Now, I want you to notice this. On the back end of the plane there, if you can see it, there's a Nazi swastika. But back then, the Nazis weren't considered bad people to a certain extent in 1933. So the United States Post Office printed 3 stamps to honor their visit to America. But if you notice on the stamps, there's no swastika. But that really did happen. We'll go on to the next one here. The United States had these territories for many years. Canal Zone, Cuba, Danish West Indies, Guam, Hawaii, Philippines, Puerto Rico. And the United States printed stamps for these different areas. And one of these I want to point out to you is Hawaii. This is the one that in the charade movie is one of the stamps they point out in the movie charade. The 2 cent or 5 cent there. This is the Hawaiian envelope with the 2 cent missionary and the 5 cent missionary stamp on it. And it is cataloged right around on the envelope, pretty close to $2.5 to $3 million. So that's interesting little tidbit there. But Hawaii was not it was a country all to itself up until about the 1890s. So yeah, I think they were part of the United States. They became part of the United States in 1896, yep. After the Civil War, and during the Civil War, the United States went stamp nuts, crazy. I wish I could show you all the pictures, but it's just voluminous. They had stamps they printed for just about everything, to gain tax income, to tax everybody, and stamps were printed by different organizations to generate income for the organizations, like the Christmas Seal organization and others. But here's a list of them. I don't want to go down all of them, but there's a whole bunch of those there. Here's like the narcotic tax stamp. Here's another one down here for firearm transfers tax, distilled spirits, beer, wine, etc. But the most interesting one that I wanted to point out right here, oh, I gotta go back. The one I wanted to point out here is right down toward the bottom here, and it's right there under local stamps. It says marijuana stamp. The United States produced a marijuana tax stamp back in 1937 to regulate marijuana. Yes?
State of Utah produced 2 marijuana stamps.
Wait a minute.
Here comes a microphone. So the people.
Utah produced 2 marijuana stamps, and this was back in the 70s, I believe, and you could go to the city county building over here and buy them. And at that time, there was a stamp club here in Provo, and so a couple of us guys, we went over and we bought the marijuana stamps. And I don't know if you remember Fred Lovelace or not, but he was the sheriff here, or the city police chief. We bought the stamps, and 30 minutes later, he came over and arrested us over at the store because we must have been carrying marijuana. But you could buy 2 stamps. One was I think it was a $10 stamp, but the other one was like a $10,000 stamp. That was for big packaging.
Interesting tidbit, isn't it? So anyway, all these stamps were put out. There's a lot of these kind of stamps. It's almost like you'd have to have a different class just to go through each one to explain each one of these because there's so many of them. So anyway, after that, here's a very popular one that people collect is the duck stamps, duck hunting stamps. I just thought I'd show a picture of this. Here's another close-up of the duck hunting stamps. These are very popular. People really like them. And one of the things about the duck hunting stamps is almost every state has their own special duck hunting stamps beside the federal duck hunting stamp. 1840, when the stamps came out, this is going back a little bit, that there were countries in the world that were not combined like they were today. One of these is Australia, and you can see how Australia was back in the 1840s and 50s. They produced their own postage stamps from 1850 to about 1912, each one of those little areas. And one of those is Tasmania. Some of these older stamps are very scarce and very collectible. I'm going to show you 3 or 4 different countries that did this. The next one is Canada. This was Canada back around 1847. And as you can see, I've actually seen envelope mailed to Canada West. That was back then. Canada East, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick all had their own postage stamps at that time. And they continued doing to up into the 1900s. Here's a good one. Here's Canada West and then Canada East with the Brunswick and these islands right here. So here we go, 1860, 1851. Newfoundland continued doing stamps up until 1947, and Nova Scotia did theirs up until 1963. So some of these old Canadian stamps from these areas are very scarce and valuable. Germany did the same thing, and here's all the German states. They're just crazy there. Look at that. And I think we have, this one here is after the war, Germany was broken up into 4 different little sections: the Soviet zone, the American zone, the British zone, and the French zone. Berlin was also broken up like that too. And here are some of the stamps from the American and British zone. And here's more. This is the French zone, and this here is the Soviet zone. Italy was also the same problem. Some of these, I've actually got one here today I'm going to show you from Italy, but the Italian states here, they didn't get combined until about 1870. They pretty much stayed separate. And those stamps, a lot of those Italian states and early stamps are very rare and scarce and semi-valuable. I didn't do very much with India, but India, this is the way it was up until about the end of, after the World War II. And India was broken up in all these little provinces. And here's, I'm gonna go back here. They had all these provinces. I did not list them because it takes 2 or 3 pages to list all of them. But they produced their own stamps up until when they combined as one country after World War II. It's amazing. Ways to collect stamps. You can collect stamps by country, cancellation, history, animal, arts, birds, celebrities, Disney, fish, historical, shapes, boats, space, and specialty sports. Here's one, it's a LDS stamp. This is from Fiji. There's another one. This is from the Cook Islands. And this is inauguration day from Bill and Hillary Clinton. This was back in 1997. And this is Audrey Hepburn. And that's the end of the presentation here. I do have 2 or 3 people here today, Al Anderson and Don Ross. They're here to show you some of the stamps. We have some stamps over here if you'd like to come take a look. Some of the interesting things, and we can show you some of the things that make stamp collecting quite interesting and unique. Do we have any questions before we go to look at some of the stamps? Yes.
I noticed the early stamps were one color typically. So that was typical. When did multiple colored stamps get started?
The one stamp that I showed you, the stamp set that did about 1869, where they had the double colors on those older stamps. That was about 1869, but that wasn't normal. Most of the stamps that were printed from the early 1840s all the way up until about I would say about 1940, 30 or 40, were still one color. There were a few double colors and stuff in that area, but there weren't very many. By 1950 and 60, colors just went crazy and they started multiple colors on almost all the stamps. The United States was a little behind the other countries around the world. There are also stamps out there that's got weird shapes to them. Tonga has a banana stamp and a few other weird ones. Some of the countries are doing hologram stamps. The United States just put out a stamp here just recently commemorating the moon landing, where you put your thumb on the stamp and it is black, and you put your thumb on it and it shows the shape of the moon. The heat actually makes it change color. So they're getting very innovative. Yes, over here. Wait.
Great Britain printed some stamps, various designs at various times in Queen Mother's birthdays, 80th birthday, 85th, but around her 100th birthday, they actually had a stamp that was oval.
So we've still got about 30 minutes left. That was a pretty good presentation, I think. What we're going to do here for the next few minutes, I have some stamps that I brought with me here today. This one is an Elvis Presley collection that I've accumulated with Elvis Presley, and there's quite a few stamps. Another one here is, I got a few also Princess Diana stamps, and that's why I've asked these gentlemen to come here today to talk a few minutes about their collecting ideas and what they've done. The first one I'm going to introduce is Al Anderson. He can come up and talk about his stamps and what he's got over here on Princess Diana. Take the mic quickly. Yeah, go over here.
This book I brought up here, it's actually came from my wife's collection. She went with me to 3 or 4 stamp shows and could never really do anything. It was boring to her and she thought it was crazy. And then she kind of got into Princess Di. And if you ever get into the Princess Di stamps, you can't collect them all. There's too many. Anyway, but there's a few up here that you could take a look at. And it's just every Commonwealth that is in the English, they printed stamps, and they didn't only print one stamp, but they printed many, many, many. For the wedding alone, she has about 25 volumes, and this is some of the wedding stamps, and they come out perforated, non-perforated. And then if you get into the deep end of it, why the watermarks on the back, they can be vertical or horizontal. And if you have some horizontal, they're very valuable. She knew about all this stuff. I don't collect Diana unless I happen to get one every once in a while. But I collect worldwide. Don't ever start that because you will never finish it. But there are a lot of fancy and good looking stamps. You talked about Switzerland has come out with, and so has Belgium, and they're actually chocolate, and you can smell it and feel it, and Austria has come out with a little leather, what do the Germans wear? Trousers. And I've seen a few of those around.
That's a very fascinating thing. I have a few Princess Diana stamps here today too, but they're a little bit more different than normal collecting. The ones I have here for people here to look at a little later is Princess Diana stamps, and she's printed upside down. See, I'm the quirky stamp man. I like to get the ones that are weird and crazy. And so you can see these here if you like a little bit later. For our club meeting we have every month over at Orem, it's really kind of interesting because Don brings some stuff in, and he likes, this is Don Ross over here. He's going to talk in a few minutes. He has a fascination with collecting, not the stamps as much, but collecting the postmarks. And he gets the postmarks, some of the most weirdest things you'd ever see on, stamped on the envelope over the stamp. And these are kind of interesting. At one time in the United States, we had, there was a big kind of like the post office asked the people to make post cancellations to go on the stamps, and there's like horses and all kinds of weird stuff on them, and wheels. And so I have one I sold here a while back, looks like Star Wars cancellation. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. So I'll let Don come up and talk about his postmarks and a couple other things.
That's only one. This morning I counted on a shelf in one room 30 of these books that are all different kinds. Each book are different ways of picking out cancellations. I point up here because John showed you a couple stamps earlier in the US, and you saw they had red cancellations or straight fat lines or all different kinds of designs. The one stamp that was printed in the 1860s, that's a 3-cent stamp, very typically had what is called a target bullseye. That would help to have the light.
It shows on the back, Don, behind.
Yeah, they can see it up there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
Go ahead and turn it off.
Okay, it's this stamp that I'm pointing at. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 rings with a center ring. The reason I mention that is one of the ways to collect this type of cancel are the different number of rings. There's somewhere there's just one ring. Somewhere there's 2 or 3. I've got one in either further down in this book or one other book where there's 7, 8, and 9 rings. Of course, the rings are not as wide a ring when there's more of them. Another one I wanted to point out are the straight line bars. Sometimes there's as many as 10 or 12 on a stamp. This one has 2. Can you see which one I'm pointing at right there?
Yeah, I think I have a picture right there.
Okay. Now, I wanted to show you this because there's a couple of other things I want to show you. Where you only have part of 2 cancels. And that's what I call multiple cancels. Now, when you come back to the real showy ones, originally, these are fancy, and these originally were carved on cork, kind of dipped into ink and onto the
Envelope.
envelope. We call them covers, but they come in different designs also. You can have this that we call crossroads. And you can have like this where we call them a rosette. And they come in many, many, many different designs. So I just thumb fast here and show you.
The one that Don's been looking for is called Kicking Mule.
Yes, where it's actually a mule kicking.
That's a
And
cancellation.
the
yeah.
cancel alone adds over a $240 value to whatever stamp it may be on, which it may already be an expensive stamp. And notice how tiny this one is. And I showed you one or two where the cancel covers the whole entire stamp. So, and then here's one that's a shield. So they come in many, many different designs. Oh. That led me to another idea to collect. And this little book, I have no idea what the value would be. I call it Humor in Cancels. And one of the stamps that I have back here toward the back, and I should have left it open and I didn't, is a stamp honoring a man by the name of Bret Hart. This stamp was printed by the U.S. In fact, the humor in stamps and my cancels aren't just U.S. Guatemala, Honduras, and other countries, Uruguay and other countries have what we call these fancy cancels also. This Bret Hart stamp was canceled in Nauvoo, Illinois. How do you spell Nauvoo? O-O. Take a look at the two O's are each right over his eyes.
He looks like he's wearing glasses.
He looks like he's wearing glasses. And that stamp, if you bought it new at the post office, would have cost you just for postage $5. It's a $5 stamp. But right now, I don't know what the value would be. And I have others here where they're takeoffs of kings, queens. One of the favorite ones to have humorous things show up are stamps involving the Queen of England, Elizabeth. This one almost looks like a poppy. And of course, I've made up little things to make them funny. This one I just started over the last weekend. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that Great Britain printed a stamp, well, several hundred stamps at Queen Mother's 100th birthday. And they're all different stamps with different designs and different sets of designs of things that she, events she attended, things of her life. So I titled this book, Queen Mum at 100. And there's this logo, and each one has that same logo in gold. And they're all printed by the Royal Mail. The Royal Mail House for printing is called Cuesta House. Any stamp, or in this case, souvenir sheet printed that's royalty for Great Britain is printed by Cuesta House. And why it's got house on there, I don't know. It's a printing company. But there are two that go over many different countries. I don't have them all yet, but I've started. And there's the one that has the large picture with one stamp of Queen Mother, and the one that pairs it for Angola has 4 stamps from her life. So there are the 2 designs that go over many different countries. So I have Angola. This one is Antigua and Barbuda, islands in the Caribbean. Ghana. Now this one I'm going to mention because this stamp is about a $40 or $50 stamp, this entire sheet. And it's only got the one picture of Queen Mother. But there's one like this with that exact picture where there's no perforation. That one is a $260 sheet. I can't afford it. Donations? So then there's Guiana and the 2 of them. And the last one that I've got right now is an island in the South Pacific called Palau. And this has the one where there's 1 stamp, and then it has the other one with the 4. Now, each of these countries have different pictures that they use of the Queen Mother. So I'm really interested in getting the rest of the set for both of those. This is the one that John asked me to show you, and it may be more interest to the men. I don't know, maybe women might get a kick out of it. In 1935, Lockheed built a plane that would land and take off in the water. And the fuselage of that plane, from the front clear to the back, was patterned after boats. When it landed, took off or landed in the water, it would slice, it would not bounce, it would slice through the waves. This is where the term came, flying boat. It was the Lockheed that became the Lockheed Martin Catalina in World War II that had troops, had a bubble on the top of the fuselage behind the pilot, had a bubble in the front, bubble in the back, and on 2 sides. The one I'm talking about is the China Clipper that predates the Flying Catalina. It became the pattern for the Catalina. Now, these all were on the first flight of what is called the China Clipper, because it was the first that took airmail from the United States, not only down to Hawaii, but over to the Philippines and over eventually to Shanghai, China, and believe it or not, down to New Zealand. Now, forms of this boat, flying boat, were also used on the East Coast. And so that was called clipper mail. But this one took off, originated its flights from Alameda, California. That's San Francisco Bay. I want to tell you what's notable about that. Because of collecting it, is how I learned about it. Alameda had a, what would you call it? It was like a military fort, but it was for the Air Force. And it had bars that came out in the water that would lift the plane and bring it back and set it down on dry land. The calling card for mailing with that was that the mail was never in California, onloaded or offloaded from the aircraft in water. It was always over land, but not in the other places where it landed. In Hawaii, Philippines, Guam, Shanghai, New Zealand, all the places that it traveled to, it didn't have those bars like they did in Alameda. But in Alameda, it was never onloaded or offloaded over water. And so some of these are very attractive. Some actually have made an attempt to have a picture of the aircraft. Some show the aircraft not only in a design, we call them cachets. These are actually designs that are printed onto the cover. And in some cases, the stamp matches, the cachet matches the stamp. In most cases it doesn't. Sometimes you get one like this where it's actually signed by a political figure. So anyway, I call this book the China Clipper. Okay. I don't know if you have any questions, but this is called topicals. And while I have, no, give up. While I call these a collection, if I showed you my books for women on stamps, it would be about that high. I have the penny black, the next 2 pence, the orange one he showed you, the 3 pence, which, by the way, the 3 pence is listed in the catalog with a higher value than the penny black, which was the first one. Go figure that one out. I don't know. But anyway, I have a lot of cancels, and my main collection are the fancy cancels and women on stamps. Now, when I say women on stamps, I'm talking sheets like Lucille Ball, another sheet that's got the picture and stamps of Lauren Bacall, and I've got one that's got the drama king, the heavy guy on TV. Huh? No. Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, yeah.
There's one of him. And those are under a group that the US calls Legends of Hollywood. And then they came out in a series. I would like to tell you one story. Can I?
Yeah, we got about a couple minutes left.
Okay, one story. I am from Southern California originally. I've lived up here since 1963 in Utah. But in California, if you're familiar with San Diego County is about the second or third largest county in the state of California. In northeast San Diego County, there's a little place on the highway that goes to Yuma, Arizona from San Diego. And that little place was called Pine Valley, and it's still there. But when in the early days, when the main way to get there was on that highway and on a Greyhound bus, the trading post was run by my grandmother, my dad's mother. She was one of the very first 50 designated as a postmistress by Grover Cleveland, President of the United States.
Thank you very much. This has been very educational and very fun. You can collect stamps for any variety of reasons, cancellations. Stamp collecting has a great history, as I showed you up here. You can learn a lot about history and stuff that's taken place. He was talking about a cancellation for where he come. I come from a little place up in Idaho near Rigby. It's a little place called Annis. And there's got a little plaque out there at the cemetery. It tells about Annis. Annis actually had a post office way back then called Annie's Place. The town is not, there's not even a town there. It's just a little farm community. But they had a general store way back then, and that's what they did. I did miss one thing in here, and I know that you like that. What is the most valuable the world stamp? And the most valuable world stamp, and I checked it on the internet this morning, is the Guiana Magenta stamp. It recently was sold this summer, I think at Christie's auction or one of the auctions like that, for $8.3 million. The piece of paper, like I said, is only about that big. And somebody has it. And I think there was another one that's pretty close to $8.3 million too out there right now. So there's about 10 or 12 of these stamps that are over $1 million. And these billionaires, they got nothing to do with their money except buy some of these things. Yes.
That one that you're talking about, they've actually put the initials on the backside of the stamp of the people who have owned it.
Okay.
It's one of the few stamps. If we get a stamp and we look it up in the catalog, we want it pristine. If it's got writing on the back, we don't want that. But this particular stamp he's talking about is the most valuable in the world. And they put the initials of everybody that has owned that stamp on the back of it, so they get away with it. Thank you.
Before I finish up, there's more ways that like I said before, there's more ways I could talk about. There's collecting tools. You have to have certain tools to collect, how to sort your stamps and stuff. There's a way to take care of them. There are stamps that you have to have all the catalogs to keep track of what you're getting. The United States catalog alone is this thick, just about all the United States stamps. I mean, there's probably 10, 20,000 stamps in there and all their little variations. And then there's all these other books that go along to help you try to identify the different stamps. I know for a fact, many years ago, I had a heart attack. And while I was laid up for a few months, I realized that I couldn't figure out these stamps, how they were, even with the catalogs and stuff. So I made my own catalog and flow charts. And one of the stamps was printed about 1920. I think it was called the Washington Franklin stamps, the red stamp around that time frame. I figured out there was like 75 different variations of that stamp. So just kind of think how just stamp collecting can be very fun, but it can be kind of confusing at the same time. Any more questions before I finish up here? Yes.
Just a quick one. The framed box you have on the table over there, that has international stamps in it, right? Yeah. Tell us about that.
This gentleman here.
I was on a LDS mission over 60 years ago, and while I would go around to families to teach them, I would gather stamps from them, and they came from all over the world. This is one here of Mao Zedong, and these are the founders of the USSR, or Lenin and Marx and those men. But it's fascinating stamps here if you want to take a look at it there. That they're over, I've had them for over 60 years, and I think they're probably 80 or 90 years old.
Go ahead, give her the.
My wife.
I framed that 20 years ago, and I think I totally ruined them. So,
Well, honestly, to tell you the truth, they are ruined, but it's still a great thing. It does have some intrinsic value because of the stamps and everything like that, but framed and everything like that, it still has a value, but the stamps, according to the stamp collecting rules and stuff, they're ruined.
That's okay.
But it's okay. I mean, it's okay. It's your memories. That's the most important part. Anyway, I think that's all for today, unless anybody else has got any questions. I think that'll be that. Yes, what Mayor?
Is counterfeiting a big thing?
Counterfeiting. Counterfeiting, fraud, yes, it's a big thing. Postage stamps, when they're first printed, the post office typically prints for almost every issue that are the commemorative ones, around 200 to 300 or 500,000 stamps. And then sometimes the stamps like the Elvis Presley stamp that was printed back about 25 years ago, they printed close to 1 billion. The face value of those stamps are printed brand new, 50 cents, 25 cents. Right now, I think they're 58 cents for the stamps coming out. Ironically, it is basically money, serious money. These are cash money. And so there are people out there that want to copy these and sell them to make money. There's been a lot of forgeries made, especially on the older stamps, to alter them so they can get the better, higher price. And so you have to be careful with that. And there's an organization or two or three that here in the United States, that are expertisers that do that. If you got something that's been valuable and you want to make sure it's for real, you have to send it back there and then they'll check it, bring it back and let you know if it's for real or been altered. And I think Don was going to explain that right here.
I have a stamp right here that I was bringing to ask Alan about.
over there.
It's called Heligoland. Heligoland is a group of stamps that are,
Off the coast of Germany.
yeah, it's like a little island. But since you asked, I'll let you take a look at that. But because of your question, let me just say, yes, we fight the fraud, the fakes, the altered stamps that people do. They even go to the trouble of, you've heard about stamps and soaking them to get them off of the covers and put them into a book. We hate this too, where people have actually taken those stamps they've soaked and put on new gum, and it totally ruins the value of those stamps. And it even brings it to such a large amount of it going on all over the world, not just in the US, that in our catalogs, you were telling me that stamp that I just showed you here, right in the catalog, it says, beware, forgeries exist. And to put that statement by any stamp in the catalog means there is a lot of it going on. And yes, they'll even take a stamp that somebody has cut with scissors and try to make it look again like it was perforated around the edges. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes. I think that's about time.